Gail Kelly, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you, Lee. It's wonderful to be here.
I wanted to start just with some of the news that's around. What's Westpac's view of the federal government's move to fix a price on carbon for 3 years?
Well, look, Westpac's long had a position that it's very important to actually tackle issues in our environment. It's been a long-standing position with Westpac, and we've had a position that moving towards an ETS is actually the right way to go. It's a trading system that allows innovation and drives out new ideas and new solutions to move us towards an environment where there's more renewable energy. So that's long been our position, and we think steps in that direction are important because they create certainty for businesses. So the step that the government have taken is a step in that direction. We'd certainly encourage very early consultation and discussion with business. There clearly hasn't been enough of that to date, so that's the direction we'd encourage more of.
Given that you back a market mechanism, are you happy to see the fixed price in place for 3 years?
Well, as long as it's an early piece and quickly moves towards a market mechanism, we do believe it's really in the market mechanism that you're actually going to get the change in behaviours, and market mechanisms stimulate people working out how do I best drive a strategy in this arena, and it encourages innovation. So it's a first step. Hopefully it'll move as quickly as possible to an ETS, which we believe is the right longer run outcome. But certainty actually is the most important thing overall, and that's what we need to see. Some consultation and some assistance, of course, to appropriate industries to help them get to that position.
Do you think that 3-year period before the transition occurs is the right time frame?
We'd prefer it to be quicker than that. Certainly.
How quick would you rather?
Well, look, a year. I don't want to give a particular time frame on it really, but certainly as quickly as we can get to an actual trading scheme, we think that would be best.
Do you see a fixed price as a tax?
Well, I think we've heard the Prime Minister herself call it a tax, but we haven't got enough detail around it, and I think that's really the imperative for the Prime Minister and the government, is to quite quickly get out there and consult and engage with business and with communities. That's what Westpac does. Our whole approach really is to try and support our customers to understand what does it mean to move towards this environment where we drive towards a carbon neutral situation, and how do companies adapt, and how can we help them as a bank and support them in what they need to do. And similarly, as a bank, we're of course working in our own business, so we've made huge strides over the course of the past decade or so in reducing our own carbon emissions, and we can all help with that.
In an appearance before a Senate committee in January, you said that in most areas we believe the Australian banking sector is highly competitive. What are the other areas?
Look, it is highly competitive, and if anything, even since the Senate inquiry, it's got even more highly competitive. Clearly we've seen throughout the GFC the intensity of competition in deposits, and that's been a clear result of the shortage of funding in wholesale markets, and the willingness for us all to really want to look after our retail deposit customers as much as we possibly can, and so clearly happy to be very competitive there.
Are there some areas where there's room for improvement?
Well, throughout the GFC, you would have seen that in the areas where lending is required to customers, there were some organisations that really just were unable to fulfil that role, and they deliberately sat on the side. There were some players that withdrew from the market altogether. Westpac didn't do that, as you know. So Westpac actually was prepared to lend and support customers all the way through the GFC, and really it was home lending that was the biggest area where there was demand for lending, and the government's fiscal stimulus clearly was very much part of that with the first homeowner grant. But some players were unable to, in fact, provide that sort of support, or chose not to provide that sort of support. Clearly that's changing now. It's great that we're through the worst part of the GFC. Markets have stabilised somewhat. There's still fragility, there's still some volatility, of course, and caution, but they've stabilised somewhat. And so we see more players coming back in, and that's really very positive. And as I've said, even since the Senate inquiry, if you look at what's happened, particularly between the four major banks, this competition is very alive and well.
What do you foresee happening with interest rates in the second half of this year?
Well, I think we can see them on hold for a while. That's certainly our economist's perspective. In fact, he would argue that there's only likely to be one interest rate increase, and that would be probably in the September quarter. So go up to 5%, but probably in the September quarter. Of course, it's very difficult to forecast interest rate movements, and one can get that wrong. But